Always nice to see such a great turnout at 8 o'clock. And breaking with tradition, we're going to start on time. There's coffee, tea, water, healthy stuff, cookies. Help yourself.
I'm going to move away.
You come up during, no problem, just because I don't want to take any of this home. The first of the three series is Kosher on the Road. It's being sponsored by David and Fran Wolf in memory of Fran's parents, Max Good, Meilech Ben David, and Regina Good, Rivka Reza Bas Yehuda Tzvi Halevi. Should I have a neshama? Should have aliyos.
Amen.
And without further ado, Rabbi Malevsky doesn't need my introduction. Stands for himself, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Pesach. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you to our sponsors. May the neshama benefit from the words of Torah, so we do thank you. And as Pesach mentioned, we have it's a three-part series. Tonight we will be addressing a few issues that relate to kashrus on the road. We next week will address a few issues that relate to Shmir Shabbos on the road. The first two classes are mainly going to be halacha, but I will warn you that I am not comfortable in declaring that everything is halacha l'maisa. There was a great posek in Europe, a grandson of the Chassam Sofer, and his name was Reb Shimon Sofer. He wrote the Shalos v'Tshuvas Sorerus Tshuva, and if you listen carefully to the words, awakening of a tshuva, meaning I'm not confident here with providing you a tshuva. I just had this awakening that perhaps there's some information I could share with you and you will benefit from it. On every single page of his sefer, he wrote on top, Ein lismoch al hara shebesefer zu. Do not rely on anything that is written within this book. And poskim of the 20th century, addressing Reb Shimon Sofer, note that we could ignore that statement and we could rely on him. So if someone like Reb Shimon Sofer made that declaration that perhaps we should ignore the psakim that he shares with us, halacha l'maisa today, lo bati ela le'orer, I've come here to make people aware of a few things. And the purpose of this class, and especially next week, is to remind ourselves of a few significant halachic issues. The third class, the one we will have in 2 weeks, deals with more of an historical issue, a fascinating issue, one that is very close to my heart, and it deals with coffee and the history of the coffee house, rabbis in coffee houses, the rabbinic approach. Coffee is a fascinating issue, not just since Starbucks came alive. It has been a fascinating issue for several centuries. That is in a few weeks from now. There is a story, and now we begin. In Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, towards the end of the 19th century, in 1889, in 1896, there was a crisis due to the Shemitah problem. What do we mean by the fact that there was a Shemitah problem? We don't label mitzvahs problems, but the reality is that if you follow the letter of the law of Shemitah, you would be required to cease all work on the 7th year in a developing country, and boy was it a developing country to go ahead and put a halt to the production when they were finally getting some of the growers were able to take hold in the marketplace, selling their produce. It would be a tremendous financial loss to observe Shemitah. In some areas, it was perhaps even a situation of a pikuach nefesh because people would not be able to feed their families. So Reb Chaim Berlin from Yerushalayim sends a question to Reb Chaim Brisker. Perhaps we could find a heter to allow somehow people to work the land on Shemitah. Can you find a heter? So the question was sent to Reb Chaim Brisker. So as you can expect, you're going to get a Brisker answer. And Reb Chaim Brisker said, listen, it doesn't work like that in halacha. You don't find heterim. You find the halacha. Meaning you turn to the Talmud, you turn to the Rishonim, you turn to the Achronim. it is black and white. If the halacha allows it, it's permissible. If the halacha does not allow it, it's prohibited. There is no such thing as finding a heter. This was the Brisker approach. A few years later, when Rabbi Zalman Meltzer was sharing this story, he noted that he disagrees with it. He disagrees. Because there are situations... I'm running into a little bit of a chair crisis here. It's fine, it's fine. The men could go behind the machitza.
Seats over here, some seats up in front.
So what do we have? The Shaila, so far so good. We have Reb Chaim Berlin sending the question to Reb Chaim Brisker. We got the Brisker's response. Rabbi Zalman Meltzer says he disagrees with Reb Chaim Brisker because we do find cases where you have to find a heter. And he quotes a Gemara on Brachos with David HaMelech dealing with specific issues where David HaMelech says, my mission is to allow Lahatir Isha Labayla, put effort and energy into finding a heter. And therefore he declared, yes, Zakobisar Zalman Meltzer, there are situations where we have to find a heter. Heter to pull down partitions, right? We have to find it. With that, I think we understand that there are situations in travel where you indeed should know the halacha, but there are times, in case of need, in case of necessity, this is already mentioned by 14th century authorities, that there are leniencies for the whole chay drachim. If you are traveling, you don't have the availability that you have and the standards that you are able to follow at home. There are leniencies that indeed you could follow. So this is something that we are going to be aware of. There's halacha, there are standards you keep. Be aware of what exists in your new environment, but as well, there are some leniencies that you could follow. Now, Chief Rabbi Lau, we've all heard of him. Many of us have heard him. Very inspiring individual. He actually is a very bright individual as well. He has insights and he has an understanding and an appreciation of the state of Israel. And he notes that, when it comes to a kashrut, to establishing a vada kashrus, there is a real serious challenge. On the one hand, you might say there's a great benefit of keeping a very high standard. Satisfy everybody. You can have the people from a right-wing background very comfortable with the kashrut, and everyone else as well. Perhaps that would work. But on the other hand, there are situations that if you're going to keep the standard very high, and as a result, without doubt, there's going to be an expense as well, you might make kashrut something that is not available for everyone. And then you seem to lose out. So what should a Vaad do? This is a very serious issue. Should the Vaad always keep a very high standard and then make the affair extremely expensive, and there are people that kashrut is not important enough for them and they're going to drop it? Or do you lower the standards? But then what? You're going to lower it? How far are you going to lower it? Is it still kosher? Are people not going to eat at affairs? It is a serious issue that every thinking Vada Kashrut has to address, come up with an answer and a philosophy. Rav Lau had an idea. I don't think it was followed through, but it was an idea. And he notes that when you come to hotels, there is a star system. When we were kids in Israel, so we would visit often people that would come to make their visits to Eretz Yisrael. And we would go into hotels, and we know as kids which hotel was a 4-star, a 5-star, a 3-star, a 2-star. It's something we were aware of. The hotel industry has stars. If any of you have membership in AAA, so you know that they have a system. It's called the Diamond System. There's a 5-diamond hotel, a few of them in the United States and Canada. Then you have a 4-diamond system. So there's stars in the hotel industry. So Rav Lau thinks that, what would be a very good idea to address this issue of kashrut? To have a Magen David system. Meaning, some establishments will be under the Rabbanut and have a 5 Magen David rating. Now that is like high-end kosher. High-end kosher. You're going to pay a price for it. You will be quite confident that every single strawberry was checked under a magnifying glass, that will be a 5-star kashrut. And then you will have another one, a 5 Magen David kashrut level. Then you will have one with a 4 Magen David, and then a 3, and then a 2. And then you will have an Ashgacha, which is weak. It is weak. It's going to be only a 1 Magen David level of kashrut. But the benefit is that the Rabbanut is guaranteeing that Jews eat kosher, that even people in secular Tel Aviv know that due to the fact that the expense won't be great, so restaurants, pizzerias could go ahead and be part of this vad of the Rabbanut, and you would walk in, you will see a sign, 1 Magen David kosher, you make your own decision what you want to follow. This is an idea he thought of. And in essence, it's a brilliant idea, because people have to understand when it comes to kashrut, it's not math. When you deal with math and when you deal with physics, there's going to be, I think you would agree, there's a final answer. Everyone's going to agree. The Mekel and the Machmer will always have 2 plus 2 equals 4. When it comes to kashrut, the halacha at times says, in case b'shas hadchak, in case of need, if it's a situation that it's Erev Shabbos, and if you're going to follow the opinion that says that it's usher, you'll have nothing to eat, you could be lenient. There is an understanding that there's subjectivity when it comes to kashrus. So why not run a vada kashrut with the Magen David system? So this is something that he mentions. I don't know if you will find that in the land of Israel. But what I can share with you today is that some of the information you're going to hear today, I will be very honest with you, that is a 1 Magen David level of kashrut. I will not recommend it. The benefit of a 1 Magen David is, number one, if you see others who do it, you could judge them favorably. I'm actually going to create a new level of kashrut that's known as a half a Magen David. A half a Magen David would be something like Hebrew National, which, by the way, it has a level of kashrut. And it's a good thing. It is a good thing. A Jew that says, you know what, I eat only Hebrew National, you should be happy, and it's something that we can be very proud of. The Jews are concerned about kosher, and they answer to a higher authority. Good thing. But at the same time, I would not recommend that you bring it into your home or into your digestive system. But we have to have that maturity. It's maturity. And that's what we should enter as we go ahead and assess this discussion. Number one, you are traveling, you should know that different communities have different issues that you can't even dream of. Different communities have different issues that we are not familiar with. And I'll give you one example. My late father was a rabbi in Mexico City from September 1976 until February 1980. Basically, he was there for 3.5 years. As a child, I thought that we lived in Mexico for a very, very long time. The older I get, I realize that 3.5 years goes keheref ayin. That's what happens. And from what I hear from some people here, that be'ezrat Hashem in 20 years from now, 3.5 years is going to be even a shorter period of time. As I zog in the Kosher Alta mention. That's what I hear from some people. Now, with that, after my father's passing, I found there were lots of notes and letters. And one of them was a letter he sent early in his career in 1977 to his Rosh Yeshiva, to Rav Ruderman in Baltimore, dealing with a specific issue which about 2.5-3 years ago I talked about here. That has to do with the crisis of the young calves. What was the crisis of the young calves? The Shulchan Aruch tells us that when you go ahead and shecht a young calf, you have to be sure either that it came its full term, meaning that it was not an animal that was born prematurely. It is considered an unkosher animal if it was born premature. However, if you wait an 8-day period, by day 8 it becomes permissible, because then if it lived for an 8-day period, it is a healthy animal and it is kosher. So therefore, the meat you will find in the marketplace in North America, in Canada, in the United States, and in Europe is basically meat, even if it's a young calf, it is after day 8, and then it is considered kosher. What happens if you come to a merchant, he's selling you young calves, and you are not sure if it reached day 8 or not? So So it's a shaila, it's a serious shaila. Could be even a suffix de oraisa. So there are poskim that say that if you are in doubt and you look at the animal and it's starting to develop its teeth and you can look at its nails and you have a level of expertise that identify this as a mature animal, so then it is okay. You could rely on this simanim. The signs would indicate that it has been in planet Earth, it has been more than 8 days since its birth. This is what the halacha tells us. In Mexico, there was an appetite for, and there was a desire in the marketplace for young calves that were very young. And when you would go ahead and walk into the Schlachthaus, you would see the young calves. And with a little bit of research that my father did there, he realized that people were honest with him, the non-Jews, and they said that these are animals that are not yet reached day 8, day 3, day 4, day 5. Meaning they were young calves, which the halacha tells us not to eat. However, in Mexico, for whatever reason, they develop faster, these animals. Maybe it's the hot chilies or who knows what. That these young calves, already by day 3, they are developing simanim that usually appear in an older animal. So there's something unique there. So now, the leniency that existed in Mexico City was that if the animal has simanim, despite the fact that you know for a fact that it is not yet reached day 8, it is considered kosher, and they allowed it in the marketplace. Now this was problematic to my father. He sends a shaila to Rav Ruderman, and he mentions there the following, that there was an old rabbi who has been there for many decades, and he claims that he has a heter, a leniency from Reb Moshe Feinstein to allow for Mexico, to allow them to eat young calves, to eat them, to consider them kosher, despite the fact they did not reach day 8, due to the fact that they have simanim, which is a tremendous chiddush. Now, the problem was that the old rabbi did not show anyone the psak, meaning it was something he argued and he claimed. At the same time, he was not willing to share with anyone the actual writing. And when Ramosha does address this issue in a tshuva to Mexico, in 1965, this is one thing that my father does not mention, but I did more research, a tshuva that Ramosha deals with this specific issue. Written to the rabbi in Mexico in 1965, he tells him that you cannot rely on simanim. If you know for a fact that the animal has not yet reached day 8, do not consider it kosher. So this is a very serious issue. Now, this issue also, there were two communities, two kehilot in Mexico, the Ashkenazi kehillah, and there was a Sephardi kehillah. The Sephardi kehillah dealt with the exact same issue. So they sent their shaila in 1979 to Reb Ovadia Yosef. But they worked something out to get a heter, because when they sent him the shaila, they noted that there are young calves that have simanim, and we don't know if they reach day 8 or not, meaning they smudged a little bit of the information. And if you present your question a specific way, this is something that unfortunately is done often, that if you want a specific great gadol to say something that is convenient for you, for politics, or for whatever other reason, if you just leave out some information or emphasize something that really is not the case, you could get the psak you want. Then in 1979, and this is in the Tshuvas of Ravad Yosef, they got the psak they wanted, that due to the fact that you don't know for a fact that they are under day 8, he tells them it's kosher. Eventually, Ravad Yosef picked up, and in a tshuva, same issue, to a different rabbi in 1987, just you see the years by the way, Ramosha Feinstein is dealing with it in 1965. The second tshuva of Ovadia Yosef deals with it is in 1987, 22 years later. I'm sure even you agree that that's a long period of time, right? He mentions that, by the way, you should know that if, as I heard now, that these calves are without doubt under day 8, so then you have a problem. So this was a serious issue that my father had to deal with in Mexico City. I've interviewed a few people that dealt with my father and how he had to maneuver through this very, very sensitive issue. Why is it being mentioned here? You could be going to Mexico City during that period of time. Things have changed there. Let's make it clear. Things have changed there. I'm not saying anything regarding the Mexicans. I don't want to mess with the Mexican cartel. But the reality is that there was an issue there, and if you would be visiting Mexico City in the late 60s or 70s or 80s, you should be aware of it. That's number one. Know what's happening in a community. How do you figure that out? Speak to people. Speak to rabbinic authorities. Speak to people who are knowledgeable who have been there. Another interesting issue that comes with this idea, know the community. I myself lived in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee is a magnificent Jewish community. If you think about it, here you have a city that has 8,000 Jews, and there's a vibrant Orthodox community, not one, two, but 3 Orthodox shuls. There's actually unity there. There are a lot of nice things about Memphis. One of the many benefits is the fact that there's an old rabbi who has been there for 65 years. And his name is Rabbi Natan Tzvi Greenblatt. Right? Yeah, he is an iconic individual. People know about him, a tremendous Torah scholar. And I consider him the last European rabbi. Why would I label him the last European rabbi? Simply because he follows the system of psak that you would find by European rabbonim. European rabbonim were independent. If you were in a shtetl somewhere in Eastern Europe, and you were a Torah scholar, and you went through the Gemara and the Rambam, and you came up with a psak, you do not care one iota that 5 kilometers down the road there is someone else that doesn't follow you. This is your city. This is how you understand the halacha. You committed yourself to understand the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Torah. This is what you do. No such rabbis exist anymore. Because today we are in a generation that everyone's in contact with someone else. And we want to know the policy, for example, when it comes to kashrut to the large kosher agencies. Independence is gone. Who is the last European rabbi that follows that system? Reb Natan Tzvi Greenblatt. Reb Natan. Now, there is a uniqueness because when we would enter into any issue that was discussed, and we would have an issue, a meeting about the Chavra Kadisha, and we would mention some modern day posek who says something, he would come up with similar guidance, but based on a reading in the Rambam, meaning the old system of psak. Quite fascinating. In one of the Varakasher meetings of Memphis, the discussion went in the direction of hot dogs, specifically Nathan's hot dogs, not the Nathan hot dogs that people eat in Coney Island, but rather there is actually a production of kosher Nathan hot dogs with a hashgacha somewhere in the Midwest. But they made it clear, it was a good hashgacha, but they noted that you should know the meat itself is not glat. So the question was, facilities in Memphis that are under the VAD, should they accept this non-glat hot dog? So Reb Natan is sitting there, and he closes his eyes for a few seconds, and he turns to us, the younger Rabbanim, and he said, you should know that in Memphis, there was never a minhag to be makpid, to demand glat. In other words, despite the fact that any other community in North America would tell you that we only eat glat, we in Memphis, meaning I'm here, I'm the authority here, I don't believe that, I know that the minig in Germany, the minig in Europe, for centuries, for 6, 7 centuries was that they ate not glat meat. I can tell you that here in Memphis, Tennessee, we follow that European tradition. End of discussion. Now let's a little bit just to revisit the glats and the mislabeling of glat. What is glat all about? We know the Gemara shares with us a list of ailments and blemishes that develop in animals that cause it to be treif. Most of them rarely occur, and therefore the Gemara tells us that we follow a chazaka and a rov. If the majority of animals do not have such problems, a development of some kind of hole in the hemsis or the beis hakosos or in the moach, you don't have to even worry about it and no need to check. You shecht an animal, if it walked in to the Schlachthaus, if it was healthy, if it was friendly, if it said good morning, if it acted like a normal animal, so you can shecht it and you do not have to concern yourself one iota. However, there is one sensitive, okay? It's good I needed to drink. So there is one area in halacha where the Rishonim, and even earlier note, where we do check. And that has to do with the lungs. because you are concerned that an adhesion, a sircha, develops between the lung and the wall of the animal. So therefore, you check the lung. So what do? The shochet, and this is something that I had the privilege of doing myself. In Santiago de Chile. We went to a shchita in Chile. They only allowed us to shech. They gave us a window between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. So if you wanted to go ahead and learn shchita, no problem. That was your midnight activity. So we would go in, and some of them were there were cold nights there, and you would get warmed up by putting your arm into the chest of an animal and trying to feel if there are any sirches. And I'm not the biggest guy, and these were gesunte, nice calves. And in some cases, the sheikh would say to me, "You didn't get to the bottom of it." That's what he told me. So we would check for sirches. If the lung was smooth, how do you say smooth in German? Glatt. So it is a smooth, glatt, kosher animal. Period. However, in Europe, the glatt, smooth animals are a minority. And as a result, you would have a problem because every single time, basically, 98 out of 100 times that you would check an animal in Europe, it would not be glatt. So what's going to happen? The small shtetl gets together before Yom Tov. They purchase, purchase the ox, the cow. They go ahead and they shecht it. 98% of the time, it's not going to be kosher. There goes fleishit, or perhaps there goes the meal, period. So therefore, there is an old tradition mentioned by the Rishonim, dated back to one of the Gaonim, Mar Yaakov Gaon. And Mar Yaakov Gaon says that you should know that not every adhesion is considered a sircha, but rather if it comes off easy, if by just pulling it a little bit, this adhesion between the wall and the lung comes off easy, he labels it a rear, which is some kind of spittle-like discharge, and if it comes off easy, it's fine. It's not glatt anymore, but nevertheless, it is considered kosher. So therefore, the Ramot tells us that the custom has been for many, many decades and centuries in Europe that they would check an animal, put their hand in, feel the adhesion, take the lung out, play with it a little bit, it comes off, they would say kosher, not glatt. That is what was done. The Sfardim, following the guidance of Rabbi Yosef Karo, said that if someone relies on that leniency, they are ma'achilin trefot le'Yisrael, meaning not a good thing, not kosher. And therefore, for Sfaradim, it's a much and far more serious issues. Okay. Now, for the record, today the term glatt is not so glatt anymore. The meat you find today that has been labeled glatt kosher is actually not the real glatt. This is a fact. But rather, if let's say they shecht an animal and they find a small rear end, it comes off very easy, so they're going to still label it today glatt. Okay. That is that, and again, we Ashkenazim don't have to sweat too much. If you're a Sephardi, sweat a little bit more. And therefore, in the marketplace, you will find what is known as Chalak Bet Yosef, indicating that it has absolutely no sirchot at all. So there are three categories when it comes to the kashrut of meat. Chalak Bet Yosef, high-end, 5 Magen David kosher. Then you will have what we Ashkenazim eat, and we'll find what we call glatt kosher. And then there are those that they had actually serious adhesion. They played with it for some time, put their finger under it, played with it, pulled it, shtupped it a little bit. It came off, and then they tested the lung in the water, and no air came out of the lung. Then they would label it as just kosher. And that, claims Reb Nata, in Europe they ate it. We don't have a minig otherwise. No, it's interesting to note, someone did research that if, let's say, you decide to open a schlacht house in an area where there are less sirchot, less issues. So if you decide a shechita that occurs in the western United States, one may expect to find only 2% of adult bovine without any sirchos. 98% of the animals shechted in western United States are going to have sirchos. When it comes to central United States, it is 85% are going to have sirchos. When it comes to Brazil, 45%. And then they mentioned that if you open a shechita in Tierra del Fuego, I'm sure you've been there.
No?
No?
Next week.
Where's the travel agent? So if you go to Tierra del Fuego in South America, between Chile or it's controlled by both Chile and Argentina, you will rarely ever find a sircha. You want to be a fruma, you want to be ready from, move to Tierra del Fuego and open a Schlachthaus there. There will be absolutely no shaila, and a fascinating piece of information. Why is this information shared with you here? No, you want to visit a community? Know what they are about. So that's this piece of information, number one. But now we'll move forward and actually share with you, hopefully, some areas of halacha. The rabbis made decrees. What else is new? Now, these are rabbinic decrees that we understand are serious, are ones that we take into consideration. There are paradigms and guidelines given that if you have a safek dorat, if you have a doubt on a Torah law, you must be strict. If it's a rabbinic issue, you could be lenient. But nevertheless, if the rabbis make a decree, we tune in, we listen, we sense that there was wisdom there, and we are bound by them. Period. Among them, Chalav Israel, Pat Israel, Bishul, Akum, and others. So let's go ahead and analyze them one by one. Number one, halachically speaking, there are no leniencies with this. We are all obligated to drink Chalav Israel. Period. Meaning, we must drink milk that we know for a fact is a kosher species milk. Cow milk, goat milk, not donkey or camel milk. It's a halach. The question is, how do we define the word must know? How do I define it? So there are those who take a traditional approach. Must know means that you must have a level of testimony. In Jewish law, in the courthouse, testimony is achieved by two people. In the laws of kashrut, testimony is achieved but with one person. So therefore there are those who follow a school that you have to have a person, a trustworthy Torah Jew, who actually observed the milking itself. That is one reading into what Chalav Yisrael is, and there is such a school which we respect and we all are aware of. Then there are those that say that is not correct, true. One way of knowing for a fact that the milk is from a kosher species is by having a Jew testifying, but another way is if you know that it's an environment that's not going to have non-kosher animals, that too makes it Chalav Yisrael. So the great 17th century rabbinic authority, probably one of the greatest authorities in the halachic canon, the Pri Chadash, Reb Chizkiah de Silva. I like Reb Chizkiah de Silva for many, many reasons. And he notes that in Amsterdam, where all farms that produce milk, you will only find kosher species. So therefore he labeled all Amsterdam milk as Chalav Yisrael. It is Chalav Yisrael. And he says, I myself, when I went to the coffee house, in those days the coffee house did not have the varieties you would find today in Amsterdam, but he went to a coffee house, he drank his coffee, and he had milk in it. This is what he was doing. What was he doing in Amsterdam? By the way, he's printing his books. We'll get to him when we get to our coffee discussion. But that is one approach. So again, a person should not say, I don't follow Chalav Yisrael. You follow Chalav Yisrael. But you have an understanding that if there is a reality, or as Rav Moshe Feinstein points out, there is government control, that you would get penalized, if your company would get penalized if they go ahead and substitute a cow milk with some other species, that itself is considered knowledge. So we call it the leniency of Rav Moshe. He's not the first one that came up with it, there are others, but this is something that we discuss within the requirement Chalav Yisrael. If a person says, I only drink what is known as Chalav Yisrael, that is a 5 Magen David level. A 5 Magen David level. Should a person follow a 5 Magen David level? Well, it's like a hotel. Some people stay only in 5-star hotels. Some people are lenient and they allow themselves to stay in a 3-star hotel. So too when it comes to kashrut, if you follow Rav Moshe, you are without doubt a 3 or perhaps a 4-star Magen David. Let's say a 4-star Magen David. You could follow the 5-star Magen David only eating Chalav Yisrael. However, you have to assess the situation. I once had a conversation with the great rabbinic authority in New York. His name was David Cohn. And I always appreciate his insights. And he told me that you should know, if you live out there, if you live in a small community, and you do not have access to Chalav Yisrael ice cream, and you deprive your children from ice cream because of your desire to be on this high standard, you are doing something wrong. It is wrong. Meaning, you want to go ahead and stay in a 5-star hotel, that's fine. But understand very well that you don't go into debt to stay in the Waldorf Astoria. You have to assess things, look at the big picture. And so too when it comes to kashrut. If something is a 5 Magen David and you could settle for the 4, look at the big picture. And this is something that we have to have the maturity and the ability to do. Respect those who do it for the right reason, but respect those who understand that there are other things we take into consideration. The issue of Chalav Yisrael. Now people wonder, they travel to the Far East, and they want to purchase milk there, or you travel to South America, or you travel to European countries. What are the guidelines? Can Ramosha Feinstein's leniency apply there? So from travelers, from world travelers, I hear that you can't trust anything that relates to food in the Far East. So therefore, think twice, do your research, speak to those who have traveled, but most probably you would not touch the milk there unless you have the actual Chalav Yisrael. In South America, we were more suspicious. South America is different. So in South America, even members in the Kollel where I was in Chile, where in North America we would drink regular kosher, regular milk in the marketplace, right? Max Milk, whatever brands they do have here. When it comes to Santiago de Chile, we did not. We did not. Dealing with the South Americans, we decided we're not trusting them so much. When it comes to European countries, do some research, but there the standards are far better than Mexico or Santiago or in other places in South America. So know the realities of where you are. Now, there is a concept in halacha called tziruf. Tziruf. Tzadi Yud Reish Vav Pei. What does the concept of tziruf mean? So it works as follows. If I have a situation, a question is asked to a rabbi. And the question was that someone took an onion. The onion was first cut with a Fleischkneif.